Venom, Carnage, and the other symbiotes who came to Earth after the Ultron Revolution. But let us focus on a story that has come before the Ultron Revolution, before Blue Marvel and the dawn of creation itself. Let us focus on the story of Knull, the god of the symbiotes. Knull was an ancient, malevolent deity who ruled over the abyss, the existential chasm that existed between the destruction of the sixth cosmos and the creation of the seventh cosmos. While Knull drew his power from and claimed to be the incarnation of the primordial darkness, it existed long before even him. Originally content to slumber in the void, Knull was awakened when the Celestials began creating the universe. The Celestials recruited Knull to be the King in Black, a cosmic caretaker for the new universe. However, Knull rejected the King in Black's responsibilities and lashed out outraged that his kingdom of darkness was being despoiled. Knull created a sword of living darkness from his newly cast shadow and decapitated one of the Celestials. Cast back into the void by the other Celestials, Knull used the slain Celestial's severed head as a forge to temper his sword in its cosmic energies, thus forging All Black, the Necro Sword. Intent on reclaiming his kingdom of darkness, Knull manifested a symbiotic suit of armor from his eldritch darkness he commanded and embarked on a genocidal campaign against the other gods and life itself, becoming a legendary figure of terror for divine beings even billions of years later. Hell-bent on returning the cosmos to the abyss, Knull created an artificial planet from the living darkness he controlled to serve as his throne world and base of operations. Experimenting with his ability to manifest life out of darkness itself, Knull began using the extoric latitude as a dumping ground for his failed creations, which millennia later would become known as the Exelon. Among his early creations were proto-symbiotes such as Mr. E, and presumably the other Shadow Realm entities like Shadow Man and Ka, as well as a horde of wyvern-like monsters, establishing himself as the divine nexus of the abyssal entity's hive mind. Knull sent them forth into the cosmos, using them to conquer countless planets, devouring civilizations and pantheons, extinguishing stars, and smother entire planets in eldritch darkness. The few gods that Knull spared were forcibly drafted into his army, enslaved to his will, and transformed into monsters using the living abyss, placed as sentries to guard the worlds he'd conquered. At some point afterward, Knull engaged an army of gold-armored gods empowered by the light in combat and slaughtered all but one of them. Pursuing the survivor, Knull managed to impale him on All Black, but was himself impaled through the head by the enemy god's spear. Knull and the dying god crash-landed on a desolate planet, where All Black left the incapacitated Knull for one of the indigenous inhabitants, Gore. Despite this setback, Knull chose to not hunt the thief down and reclaim All Black, though he remained aware of Gore, unwittingly following in his footsteps as the God Butcher. After recovering from his injuries over the course of a century, Knull began experimenting with his powers and discovered that he could manifest amorphous parasites called symbiotes from the living abyss and bond them to lesser life forms, corrupting life rather than eradicating it. Knull's reign of terror came to an end in the 6th century when two symbiote dragons, one black and one red, arrived on Earth and were named Grendel and Grendel's mother by the Danes. Grendel's rampage was stopped by Thor, who blasted it with divine lightning and severed Knull's connection to the vast majority of the symbiotes. As the symbiotes bonded to benevolent hosts, the hive mind became tainted with the notions of honor and nobility, leading them to rebel against their god, and imprisoning him at the heart of the throne world, which they renamed Clintar, their word for cage. Forming an organization known as the Agents of the Cosmos, the symbiotes of Clintar subsequently attempted to expunge the Dark Origins and redeem themselves by acting to protect the cosmos they'd once terrorized. Centuries later, Knull's influence remained, as shown by the likes of Gore wielding the All Black, the Necro Sword, and Betty Ross in possession of the Symbiote Codex, the latter of which was later buried in the center of the world and found in the Savage Land. Knull's influence has been spread throughout the universe, and it is only a matter of time before Earth falls victim to his power.